Hi, I'm Marilee. Welcome to our video series on National Trusted Exchange. Today is the second video in the series. We're going to do a deep dive on eHealth Exchange. If you haven't yet seen the first video in our series where we give the introduction, you might want to check that out first. But if you're ready to roll with eHealth Exchange, let's go ahead and get started. In our first video, we talked about the evolution of National Trusted Exchange networks over time. As you can see on this timeline view, eHealth Exchange is actually the oldest of all of the National Trusted Exchange networks. But for purposes of today's presentation, I really want to focus on two of the more recent events as it relates to eHealth Exchange as an organization. In 2018, it was spun off as its own nonprofit organization. That kind of got it out from underneath the wings of the Sequoia project and set it up to be able to become part of a network of networks. And you can see what happens next in 2019 is that eHealth Exchange actually becomes a Carequality implementer. This now sets the stage for the big three national networks, eHealth Exchange, Carequality, and Commonwell, to exchange data across all their participants. And as you can imagine, this is really important and really sets us up to scale National Trusted Exchange across the entire country. When you're trying to decide which one of these networks is going to be best for you, it's probably not a surprise to you that one of the best places to start to do your research are the websites for each one of the networks. For eHealth Exchange, I've got the main page pulled up here on the slide so you can take a look at it. Now, the challenge is there's a lot of information on these websites. So what I thought I'd do today is share with you those web pages that I come back to time and time again to keep track of the most important information about the eHealth Exchange network. Let's start with the participant page. This is where you can find out how many healthcare organizations are participating and actually look and find a specific participant if you like. At the bottom of this page, you have the ability to browse through all of the participants and/or look up a specific participant that you're interested in. I do want to call your attention to the note column. One of the things that the note column does is provide for you that next layer of detail that's going to help you understand how a given participant is actually participating with eHealth Exchange. For example, one of the things that's listed here is whether they are participating in the hub or not. What the heck is the hub? So, first of all, this is a new piece of technology that eHealth Exchange rolled out about a year ago. It simply makes it easier to connect with specific endpoints or participants across the network. But because some participants have been on eHealth Exchange for quite a long time and before they adopted this hub technology, not everyone yet has moved onto the hub platform. As a new participant, you will be required to join the hub, but you'll need to know if the participants that you're most interested in sharing data with are already on the hub or not. Don't worry, you can still exchange data with them if they aren't on the hub. It just means there might be a couple extra steps to make sure that that connectivity can happen. So, of course, some of the most important participants on the eHealth Exchange network are the federal partners, the VA, the DOD, and the Social Security Administration. There are some special things you want to keep in mind if your goal is to connect with those federal partners. First of all, specifically to the VA and the DOD, they have some special requirements for onboarding with them. First, you're going to need to be fully onboarded and live with eHealth Exchange generally. At that time, you're able to then put in a request to the VA that you would like to share data with them. They have their own separate onboarding process. That can be a bit of a time-consuming process, so you're going to need to bring a lot of patience to that process. What they're most interested in is looking at the clinical content that you will be providing. And so most of the time in the VA onboarding process revolves around that clinical content evaluation. If you're interested in connecting with the Social Security Administration, they also have some unique content that they want to share. I recommend that you reach out to the eHealth Exchange team to talk about what you might need to do to connect with the Social Security Administration if that's what your interest is. Now, one important thing to keep in mind, specifically with the DOD and the VA, is that they have a process that we call prefetch. What they're doing there is prefetching data today for their appointments for tomorrow. Now, as you can imagine, there's a lot of patients that get seen throughout the VA and the DoD. So that is actually a large number of transactions. You can expect between about 100,000 to 175,000 incoming patient queries every day in roughly a 4 to 5 hour span. You need to make sure that your technology environment will support that high-level volume of incoming patient queries. Once you've reviewed the participant list and you've determined that you are indeed interested in moving further in pursuing eHealth Exchange, you want to go to the How to Apply page. This page is really helpful because it really pulls together everything that you're going to need. It becomes your checklist of onboarding to eHealth Exchange, and it definitely is where some really critical information is located. For example, who's eligible to join eHealth Exchange? What are the use cases from a data exchange perspective and the technical requirements? Those two things can be found in the eHealth Exchange application. How much is this going to cost you? That very important information is located in the participation agreement itself. Let's take a quick look at the application form. You'll see that one of the first questions it's asking is, what type of entity are you working with? For the most part, you're looking at hospitals, health systems, and HIEs that are eHealth Exchange members. But you can see in the highlighted areas that vendors and payers and similar organizations can now join. Just be aware that you're not going to see those types of folks in great numbers. Now, the other thing that the application really makes it easy to understand is, what are the data exchange use cases and technical requirements at a high level that are available to you. So what you want to do is review these different questions that they're asking you about what kind of data do you want to exchange and how do you want to exchange it. For the most part, you're looking at IHE-based clinical summary document exchange. This is what you're going to see for almost all the participants for the purpose of treatment. Now, there are other use cases listed here, and there's other ways technically that we can share data via eHealth Exchange. So some of this is pretty new, just in the last year or so. For example, FHIR is now being supported. We can do more directed FHIR-based queries for things like medications or labs. Be aware that this is new and not a lot of folks have adopted these new use cases, but it certainly shows how rapidly National Trusted Exchange standards and use cases are evolving. Now, one of the new use cases that's emerged in the last year or so I find really exciting, and that's electronic case reporting. That allows healthcare organizations to push data that's needed from a public health perspective to those respective agencies. So, for example, you could push lab data for COVID reporting or immunization data, for example. And this is done under a slightly different set of IHE standards or even direct secure messaging. Now, as you're reviewing these use cases and their associated technical standards, don't get too worried if your core technology vendor isn't able to meet the standards specified in eHealth Exchange. Companies like Zen exist so that we can help bridge those differences or those gaps between what your current technology can support and what folks like eHealth Exchange are requiring. Now we're ready to move over to the participant agreement itself. One of the most important pieces of information that's in that agreement is what all of this costs. The cost, quite honestly, for eHealth Exchange specifically, can get fairly complicated. Let's start with just thinking about it at a little bit higher level. There are two types of costs associated with eHealth Exchange: a one-time onboarding fee and annual recurring participation fees. So, not too difficult, right? Well, it gets a little harder as we move into some of the details. For the onboarding fees, it has two possible components. Every eHealth Exchange participant that onboards is going to pay a one-time fee to do smoke testing. And that's simply designed to make sure that generally the IHE messages are meeting eHealth Exchange technical specifications. The second component applies to some folks but not others, and that's the security testing. What you want to do is take a quick look at that list of validated products. I've provided you the link here, and that will tell you if your EMR system, for example, is on that list of validated products, and if so, you can skip the security testing. If you do need to do the security testing, that's another area that Zen does a lot of work in that area to help our folks get onboarded. The annual recurring participation fees are where it gets to be a little complicated. First of all, there are 3 different kinds of annual recurring fees. The first one and the second one are always going to apply, particularly today with new participants. One is your eHealth Exchange annual participation fee, and the other is what they call the hub fee. For the annual participation fee on eHealth Exchange, it's going to be based on either annual revenues or annual expenses, depending on what type of organization that you are. It depends on whether you're a provider organization or a vendor organization. The key takeaway here is that the entry-level annual fees for vendors is quite high, vendors and payers. And so you want to make sure that you talk to the eHealth Exchange team when you're looking at these costs to make sure that you're categorizing your type of organization correctly as it relates to the fees. Now we're taking a look at the hub fees, and you can see it's very similar. Now, there is something important to note about the hub fee. If you're a provider organization with less than 500 million in revenues a year, and you're in less than 5 states, you do not have to pay a hub fee. So obviously that's a very important consideration, and is designed to make sure that most healthcare organizations, provider-based organizations, do not have to pay an additional fee. However, if you're large enough, or if you're a vendor or payer organization, those hub fees do apply. Finally, we have the third possible annual recurring fee, and that's Carequality participation. Now, the good news is this is purely optional. Folks on eHealth Exchange do not have to opt into Carequality participation. However, if you choose to not opt in, you are missing a number of other important participants that you may want to exchange data with. Again, the type of organization that you are is going to drive your fee. So you want to make sure that you're categorizing yourself correctly and calculating your fee based on your revenues correctly. And that's what the eHealth Exchange team is there to help you do. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about some of the legal requirements. We're still talking about the participation agreement here, and I've highlighted a couple of important sections. Let's start with Section 12, Expectation of Participants. One of the most common questions I get is this: do we have to share information with everyone on eHealth Exchange? Because I just have a couple of selected folks that I'd like to exchange data with. And the answer is right here in this section. If you are doing an outbound query for treatment purposes to anyone on eHealth Exchange, then you have a duty to respond to anyone else on eHealth Exchange. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but something you absolutely need to keep in mind pretty much for all of the National Trusted Exchange networks. Another area of the participant agreement that I think is really important for folks to understand is Section 1404. And this simply states that all of the eHealth Exchange participants have an obligation to inform the network, in this case eHealth Exchange, if an adverse security event has taken place. So that is something that you'd want to put in your plan in the case of a possible PHI breach. So now we've covered a lot of the important considerations. And the bottom line is you've got a choice to make. Is eHealth Exchange participation right for you? I'm just going to real quickly summarize what I think the key decision influencers should be for anyone thinking about eHealth Exchange participation versus some of the other networks, for example. First of all, do you need a fast path to the federal partners? Because really today, eHealth Exchange is the only way to get access to those federal partners like the VA, the DoD, and the Social Security Administration. Secondly, If not the federal partners, are there other high-value participants that, as you're comparing the participant list across all the networks, are almost exclusively in eHealth Exchange? If that's the case, obviously it makes sense to look strongly at eHealth Exchange. Third, I just do the math. As we do these other deep dives into each one of the networks, they each have their own unique cost models, and you'll need to be thinking about what your upfront cost is and what your annual recurring cost will be, and compare that against the value you get for participating with a particular network. There is an aspect of exchanging data that we haven't talked about yet in this presentation. We actually mentioned it in the introduction, and I'll be talking more about it when I do the Commonwell presentation, which is about, do you think you need a record locator service? This is available as built-in to the Commonwell's network and is an option under Carequality network. Record locator service simply means that you have a better chance of finding a particular patient when you do a query, because it's doing that patient indexing for you. Finally, keep in mind, like we've talked about several times today, that folks like Zen Healthcare IT are positioned to help you, one, walk through these decision points and make sure that you're making the right decision, and number two, help you fill in any technology gaps that you might have to being able to participate in these national networks. And we encourage you to reach out to us if you think we can be of assistance. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope that I've given you a little bit better insight on some of the details about eHealth Exchange.
If you need help onboarding to eHealth Exchange or any of the other national networks, be sure to click the schedule meeting link below to speak with an onboarding specialist today. To learn more about how Zen can help you tackle your healthcare interoperability challenges, be sure to check out our website at consultzen.com.